It was just past midnight, and the streets of the city hummed with the low, persistent murmur of traffic. Raj had been driving for nearly 10 hours straight, weaving through dimly lit avenues and crowded intersections, feeling the fatigue press against his shoulders like a heavy coat. The glow of the streetlights flickered against the windshield, and the occasional honk or shout reminded him that the city never truly slept. He was about to call it a night, craving the quiet of his small apartment and the promise of a warm meal, when his radio crackled with a request from the dispatch. A mother, frantic and tearful, needed a ride to the hospital immediately. Raj's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the clock. Midnight. He rubbed his temples. The request was urgent, but it wasn't far from where he was parked. With a resigned sigh, he flicked on the meter and eased the cab out onto the road, feeling the weight of exhaustion in every muscle. When he arrived at the hospital entrance, the scene that met him made him stop in his tracks. A young mother, probably in her late 20s, was kneeling on the curb, her hair disheveled and sticking to her damp forehead. Her clothes were crumpled as if she had run straight from work, or perhaps she hadn't slept in days. In her arms, she clutched a small child wrapped in a thin blanket, who was shivering and pale. Her face was streaked with tears, and her lips trembled as she muttered prayers under her breath. Raj parked the cab carefully, killing the engine, and watched her fumble desperately through a worn purse. Coins spilled onto the pavement as she searched for enough money to pay him. Raj felt a tug in his chest. He had seen people in trouble before. Late-night drunks, lost tourists, panicked passengers, but something about this mother was different. It wasn't just desperation. It was raw fear, the kind that rooted a person to the spot and made everything else fade away. She looked up at him, eyes wide, brimming with tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered, voice quivering. I don't have enough. Raj leaned back in his seat for a moment, taking a steadying breath. His mind raced through every reason he might need to refuse. He had bills waiting for him at home, a daughter in college counting on his support, and yet, somehow, all of that felt meaningless in comparison to the scene before him. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she rocked back and forth, soothing her child and muttering apologies to someone who couldn't understand. Listen, he said gently, opening the door and stepping out. The cool night air hit him, sharp and bracing. Don't worry about the fare. Just get inside safely. That's all that matters. She blinked at him, as if not fully understanding. I can't. Shish, Raj said softly, putting a hand on her shoulder. It's fine. Really. Go. The relief that washed over her face was immediate and tangible. She swallowed hard, tears running freely down her cheeks, and nodded shakily. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. She adjusted the blanket around her child and hurried toward the sliding glass doors of the hospital, not once looking back. Raj watched them disappear into the building, his heart still thudding in his chest. He closed the cab door gently, leaning against it for a moment. The city noises, the distant wail of a siren, the rhythmic thump of a truck passing, felt muted, almost reverent, as if the world itself had paused to let that moment breathe. He thought about all the times he had driven people across town, counted coins, argued over fares, and now realized that none of it mattered compared to what he had just witnessed. He climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and sat there in silence for a long moment, staring at the reflection of the empty street in his rearview mirror. For once, he wasn't thinking about the money he had earned, or lost. He was thinking about the small, trembling child and the exhausted mother who had leaned so heavily on him without even knowing his name. The city was alive, but for Raj, something inside had shifted. He didn't know if he would ever see them again, didn't even know if the child would be okay. But he felt a quiet certainty, a kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. He had made a choice, and it had nothing to do with fare meters or shifts or hours worked. In that moment, under the cold glow of the streetlights, he realized that sometimes, the right thing to do was simply to act, without calculation, without hesitation, without expectation. As he pulled away from the curb and merged back into the stream of cars, he felt a subtle change in the world around him. The city, relentless and unforgiving, seemed just a little softer, just a little more human. And Raj, a tired taxi driver on a midnight shift, felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Raj returned to his cab, shutting the door quietly behind him. The night air had grown colder, and he pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, trying to shake off the lingering chill from the hospital encounter. He sank into the seat, staring blankly at the dashboard, letting the hum of the engine lull him into a rare moment of calm. The mother's desperate face haunted him, the way her lips quivered, the shiver that ran through her child. He couldn't help but think of his own daughter, curled up at home, sleeping soundly while he was out here, miles away. The streets were quieter now, the rush of traffic earlier reduced to a sparse trickle of headlights gliding over wet asphalt. Raj idly twirled the taxi meter, watching it tick, though he knew the numbers didn't matter anymore. Money had suddenly lost its importance. The encounter with the mother and her child had left a strange warmth in him, mingled with unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that his small act, refusing payment, had somehow shifted something invisible, like a pebble dropped into a deep pool. He started the cab and pulled back onto the main road, trying to focus on something mundane. The cracks in the pavement, the neon signs flickering on empty storefronts, the smell of fried street food wafting from a distant late-night vendor. Yet, every turn of the wheel, every passing street lamp, reminded him of the mother's fearful eyes. She had been so fragile, so utterly dependent on a stranger's kindness in that moment. And he had been that stranger. Hours passed, though time seemed to stretch and collapse in strange ways. The night deepened, and Raj found himself cruising familiar streets almost on autopilot, the city's nocturnal rhythm blending with the steady beat of his thoughts. He had just passed the old bridge that spanned the river when his phone rang. The ringtone cut sharply through the quiet hum of the cab, making him start. He fumbled for it, squinting at the unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Hesitant, he pressed it to his ear. "Hello." His voice sounded hoarse, rough from hours of driving and speaking little else. "Sir, is this Raj?" The voice on the other end was calm but urgent, tinged with relief. "This is the children's ward at Central Hospital. You helped a mother earlier tonight. The one who came in with her child." Raj's pulse quickened. Yes, that was me," he replied, gripping the steering wheel. Is everything okay?" His stomach twisted into knots. There was a pause, and then the voice continued. "The child, she's stable now. We're still monitoring her, of course, but she's going to be fine. Thanks to you, she made it through the night. You gave her mother the time she needed to reach us without worrying about payment, without panicking." Raj leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly, relief washing over him in a wave. But it was quickly replaced by disbelief. "Wait, you're saying, it was me? My decision to?" "Yes," the nurse said gently. "Because you refused the fare, the mother didn't have to stress over money. That allowed her to focus entirely on getting her child inside quickly. That split second of kindness, it mattered more than you realize." Raj's mind raced. He thought about the coins she had spilled, the trembling of her hands, the desperate prayers she had muttered under her breath. He remembered the child's small body, shivering in the thin blanket, and how helpless he had felt watching it all unfold. And now, he realized, that moment of simple human empathy, without calculation or expectation, had literally made the difference between life and death. I don't know what to say," he murmured, voice barely audible over the hum of the idling engine. I did what I thought was right at the time." "Sometimes," the nurse said softly, "that's all that matters. You didn't know it would save her, and yet it did. You might never see her again, but you've changed her life. You've changed hers, and her mother's, forever." Raj stared out at the darkened streets, his reflection shimmering in the rain-specked windshield. The city, which had felt cold and indifferent only hours ago, now seemed strangely alive, as if acknowledging what had just happened. His exhaustion hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. Fatigue gave way to something heavier, more grounding, a deep, quiet understanding that life's worth wasn't measured in fares or hours worked, but in the small, uncalculated acts that ripple outward, far beyond what anyone can see. He sat there for a long moment, letting the news sink in. Somewhere inside him, a warmth spread that had nothing to do with the cab's heater or the night's chill. He had been given a rare glimpse of the consequences of human kindness, a reminder that even strangers could wield immense power with nothing more than compassion and a decision to act without hesitation. As he finally started the engine again, merging back into the quiet streets, Raj felt a subtle but undeniable shift within himself. The city's lights flickered in his eyes, distant and familiar, yet suddenly charged with a sense of possibility. He had done something small, but its effects were vast. And in that moment, he understood something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the heaviest weight, and sometimes, the most ordinary people become the unexpected heroes of someone else's story. Raj parked his cab in a quiet corner near the hospital entrance, his hands still trembling slightly from the conversation on the phone. He had promised himself he wouldn't get too involved, that he would just go home and let the night fade into memory. But now, the sense of urgency in the nurse's voice tugged at him like a thread he couldn't ignore. He stepped out of the cab, the cold night air biting through his jacket, and began walking briskly toward the hospital. The sliding glass doors parted automatically, and the warm, antiseptic smell of the hospital hit him like a wave. The fluorescent lights reflected off the shiny floors, creating a harsh contrast to the soft darkness outside. Nurses hurried past, phones in hand, charts clutched under arms, their movements precise and urgent. Raj paused for a moment, trying to get his bearings, when a familiar voice called out. "Raj, over here." He turned to see a nurse waving him toward a private room at the end of the hallway. Her eyes were bright, wet, with tears, but smiling. The world around him seemed to blur as he followed her, his heartbeat pounding like a drum. He had never been a part of something so delicate, so life-altering. He was just a taxi driver, used to routine and chaos in equal measure, but this felt sacred. As he approached the room, the door opened slightly, and a small figure wrapped in blankets peeked out. Raj's breath caught in his throat. The child, the one he had seen shivering in the night, was there, eyes still heavy with illness but no longer frantic or panicked. The mother stood beside the bed, her face pale but glowing with relief, hands pressed against her child's shoulder as if shielding her from the world. "She's awake," the nurse said softly. "Stable, strong. She's going to be okay." The mother turned, and when she saw Raj standing there, her eyes widened in disbelief. Tears welled up, and she took a tentative step forward. You came back," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. I didn't have the money. I didn't know what to do." Raj shook his head, feeling a lump in his throat. "You did everything you could. I just helped you get here," he said quietly. "That's all. Your daughter, she's strong. She fought." The mother's hands trembled as she reached out to touch his arm, a gesture of pure gratitude. "No," she said, shaking her head. "It wasn't just helping. You gave me hope. You gave us time. Time can be everything." Her voice cracked, and she pulled him into a brief, desperate hug. Raj felt the weight of her gratitude settle over him, heavy and warm, like a soft blanket against the cold night outside. He stepped back, giving them space, and for the first time, allowed himself to look at the child fully. Small features, so delicate, so fragile, yet fighting with a stubborn strength that made Raj's chest ache. He realized that in that moment, he had become more than a driver, he had been a silent witness to a life saved. The realization hit him like lightning. One simple choice, refusing a fare, had rippled outward into something immense. A doctor entered quietly, giving Raj a brief nod of acknowledgement. "Thanks to this gentleman, we were able to stabilize her faster," the doctor said. Timing was critical. He didn't know it, but his decision made all the difference. Raj nodded, swallowing hard, unable to find the right words. Words felt inadequate, almost absurd. The mother's tears flowed freely now, and she knelt beside the bed, whispering to her child in a low, trembling voice. Raj watched, feeling a mix of awe and humility. He had spent his life navigating the streets of the city, ferrying strangers, counting coins, surviving the chaos of traffic and long nights. And yet, this brief encounter, this choice to act without calculation, had changed everything. He stepped toward the door, realizing it was time to leave, but not before one last glance. The mother caught his eye and mouthed a silent, "Thank you," a gesture that carried more weight than any words could. Raj felt a strange warmth in his chest, a sense of fulfillment deeper than anything money or recognition could ever provide. As he walked back to his cab, the sounds of the hospital fading behind him, he felt the city differently now. The streets, the lights, the endless flow of people, all of it seemed imbued with possibility. He had glimpsed the profound impact of a small act of kindness, seen how one decision could ripple outward and touch lives in ways impossible to predict. He started the engine, the hum filling the quiet street, and as he drove into the night, he carried with him a simple truth that would never leave him: that even ordinary people, in ordinary moments, can become the most extraordinary heroes in someone else's story. And sometimes, all it takes is choosing compassion over calculation, hope over fear, and humanity over routine.